Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Della Coltman, joined as always by Elliott Tanti, and we have a very special guest joining us for the very first time on this specific show. We have Tyler Walzak joining us. Tyler Walzak is one of our co-hosts on the PitStop podcast that comes out every Tuesday, and he has also got a very special project we're working on here at the Ordinary Podcasting Network. He's going to be hosting his own NFL football show coming later in the summer as the NFL season gets ramped up. It is called Running Down the Clock. We are very excited about it. It's been a work in progress for a little while, but we're excited to announce it today, and we're excited to have him on the show. Tyler, welcome. How you doing?
Not too bad. Thank you very much. And yes, very excited for that NFL podcast. We're just putting down formats and talking now and doing some practice sessions and all that stuff. But it's free agency, so things happen quickly and podcasts get old quickly.
Absolutely. So we are going to tap your expertise and talk some NFL today because Braden's not here, and we have Elliott, who's sort of our resident NFL fan on this show. But now he gets to line up across the line of scrimmage with a real solid, diehard NFL fan who I think he's really looking forward to having some conversations about the offseason with. So we will do that in our third topic. We're going to talk basketball, the NCAA March Madness, obviously going both the men's and women's tournaments. That will be topic 2. And before that, we will talk about the NHL Trade Deadline, which if you are listening to this on Monday, this podcast will already seem old. But we'll talk about what we know so far at the time of recording and sort of where we expect things to go. Let's get to it. Here's topic 1. Okay. As I just teased, we're going to talk NHL. We have lots of trades that have already happened. This is sort of a trend that's been growing over the past couple of years where the trade deadline is no longer a single day, but it kind of stretches into a week before. It starts as a trickle, and then slowly we get some of the bigger deals. I know it's terrible for the networks that try to build an entire day-long show and they end up with all of the big meaty stuff happening before they even get on the air. But as fans, it's fun to see it kind of happen. And it also lays the groundwork for what might happen on Monday. Obviously, you're listening to this Monday, but for us, we're recording this Sunday. So here's what we know so far. Some big trades have happened. The biggest one, or the two biggest ones, I think, happening over the weekend: Claude Giroux going to Florida for Owen Tippett, a bunch of picks and some prospects going both directions. But that's a big trade as far as, name value. Claude Giroux is a very big player, and Florida is a very good team that adds another weapon to their arsenal. We also found out that they have, I believe, Aaron Ekblad is going to be put on long-term IR for the remainder of the season, but of course they expect him, much like Nikita Kucherov, to be healthy come playoff time. The salary cap means absolutely nothing. And the other really big trade, and this is why I'm excited Tyler's here as a diehard Maple Leafs fan, Mark Giordano and Colin Blackwood have been traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for 2 seconds and a third from the Seattle Kraken, who I think have accepted that their draft and first year in the league did not go to plan. They've moved on, traded the first franchise captain already. Mark Giordano, obviously a Toronto native, and he gets to go play for his childhood team and make them a little bit deeper on the back end. Let's start there, Tyler. You saw this trade. I know there was another trade earlier in the day, or pardon me, after that, Travis Dermott going as well. Where are the Maple Leafs right now going into the trade deadline and sort of the last quarter of the season?
Well, I think even with this trade right now, they're in the same spot that they were before they made the trade. And it's the same Maple Leafs, which is frustrating. It's the same Maple Leafs talk for what seems like the last 3 or 4 deadlines. It's defense. And I know that every team right now is trying to add defensemen because defenseman depth in the playoffs is key, but we have not gone into the playoffs in the last 5 years confident with our starting goaltender. Jack Campbell, sure, he's been good. He's had moments where he was the best this year, but he's fallen off quickly and recently. And he's had injury problems. And then before that, Frederik Andersen couldn't get it done in the playoffs. So I think that this trade today doesn't mean anything unless they go out and get a goalie, specifically a Marc-Andre Fleury, I believe, because he's won cups and he consistently is just winning games in playoffs. If the Leafs don't make a move to get a goalie, then I don't know what this deal does for them.
Obviously, yeah, I think that's what you sort of mentioned to me in a text earlier today, that's what you think the Travis Dermott thing might be a foreshadowing of, is they needed to get a couple extra picks in line going into tomorrow, some arsenal in the tank. Do you think that's what they're trying to do?
Well, they also had to get under the cap. I think they've only got like $1.4 million of deadline cap space now. And with that new trade, they had to get rid of somebody at some point. So it made sense to get rid of Dermott. And also I do believe that they need that third pick just to maybe entice someone else. If they are seeing a goalie slip for someone else who's offering a first and something, then they can throw this third back in there.
So Elliott, obviously, what jumps out at you so far when you look at the sort of the list of who's been going where? What teams, what movers and shakers for you do you either expect a lot more from, or do you think have already made a pretty big impact for their team?
Oh, well, I think you couldn't go any further down this line of conversation without talking about what the Florida Panthers have done. They've clearly solidified themselves and made very clear to their fan base and the rest of the league that they're going to be the team to beat heading into the playoffs this year. And it's a strong team, and they've got a good core around them. But the added, obviously, Giroux is a game changer. And I think what it also spells is, it not only is it an added asset for them, but it takes away an asset from one of their biggest competitors out of the West, which was the Colorado Avalanche, which seemed to be the other team that was really invested in that move and moving forward in that way. At least that was the one that we kept hearing about. For me, I think taking a larger step back, I don't know what's more surprising, the prices these teams are paying for these players, or the fact that there are teams willing to pay them. I mean, I think Montreal kind of kicked it off and set what it's going to cost to do moves, and that's the market price. And I can't believe how many first rounders are being thrown around, really good prospects for what are mostly rental players. I'm shocked at that. Tyler, I do want to throw it back to Toronto one more time, because I know that there is a contingent of Maple Leafs fans that are really engaged and feel as though goaltending needs to be addressed. Sounds like you're one of them. I feel very similarly here in Edmonton, but hasn't Kyle Dubas sort of put that to bed and said that that's not going to happen? And doesn't the Giordano trade sort of like solidify that?
He said that, but I mean, that could just be coach speak, right? That could just be something they're saying just so that people don't think that they're buyers. But I mean, you have to know, everybody who watches hockey in the NHL right now knows that the Leafs want to win. They're in win now mode. They're a team that hasn't won in a very long time, and they need to live up to that Toronto Maple Leaf standard that for some reason exists because they're in the biggest market. To me, there's one player that plays every single minute of a game, and that's the goalie. And if that's not your best player on the ice, then your chances are less than someone else's to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and as Elliott says, obviously, Edmonton Oilers fans know that all too well, as they themselves are finding them in this very precarious position of, do you go with the hot guy right now, even though you've been burned and before and have seen it hasn't been working. And Elliott, I'll circle back on your point. I think I would probably tend to agree with you. The Florida Panthers are definitely all in. They've spent a lot of, their sort of first, they've traded 2 first rounders already this offseason. They traded a first and a third to go and get Claude Giroux, as well as Owen Tippett, who is a genuinely good NHL hockey player and has been a big part of their team. But obviously he's no Claude Giroux. And then earlier we saw them go and get their big defenseman. And Tyler mentioned, how important defensemen seem to be. Ben Sherratt from Montreal, they traded a first for him as well. So you're right. It does seem like the prices are very steep, and I'm curious to see as we go into the actual trade deadline for the teams that are looking for some of the slightly less flashy rental players out there. What will the asking price be? Let's talk about that for a second. We have the Oilers, who definitely need a defenseman. They're not going to go and get a big flashy defenseman. They don't have the cap space for it. If they're going to go get somebody, it's going to be like a Zdeno Chara or a PK Subban, and they're going to either have to make a hockey trade with a Tyson Barrie going the other way for the cap space, and like a third. What do you think, Elliott, as an Oiler fan? Well, I mean, let me change it from what do you think? What do you hope as an Oiler fan to see tomorrow? Or do you think that, as the old adage goes, Ken Holland will keep his powder dry?
What did I say last year at the trade deadline? The Oilers are going to do nothing, and then they essentially did nothing, and nothing happened. I mean, I think there's always this sort of like virtue signaling that the GM does to its players. It's like, oh, if you guys got there, you deserve this. So we're going to add a 6-7D. So to show that you guys did a good job this year and made the playoffs. I'm anticipating one of those type moves. a 4th rounder for something. I mean, so people were talking about Chara today. That'd be interesting. I don't know. I don't know how cool, I guess.
Well, we'll definitely have one of the oldest aggregated teams on the ice. I mean, between Duncan Keith, Mike Smith, and Zdeno Chara, our team is almost all collecting pensions.
Well, and it's amazing given that they've basically gutted all of our defensive depth. So we've had about 16 defensive rookies play this year on the back end. But no, I mean, I think that's sort of my thing is, it's going to be some tweaking around the edges, some sort of signaling, centerman or depth guy for the team. I think Oilers fans need to sort of take the Evander Kane signing as like the deadline deal to make the team better that happened just like a month and a half earlier. There's not a lot of cap space, just as there was last year. The team is what the team is. I don't really anticipate anything. And if there is a move, I don't anticipate it'll be substantial. I just hope it doesn't regress the team.
Yeah. Tyler, when you look at the rest of the league right now, and more specifically as a Maple Leafs fan, when you look at the Eastern Conference, I mean, who worries you out there? Who I think has already done what they need to do? Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I was hoping to I was waiting to jump in here. Sorry, but Elliott, you mentioned Colorado when you're talking about Florida. Now they're built to win right now, and they're built for the last couple of years, and they've got 3 or 4 more years left. But they've been fairly quiet the last few trade deadlines. Do you think that because of what Florida is doing now, that Colorado has to potentially be buyers now in this market just to keep up?
I mean, I think so. If they're looking to, I think it's a bit of an arms race. Didn't Langasta get hurt this week though too? I wonder how that's impacting their decision making, and what that may mean for them. It may actually end up being a positive, in that apparently now the cap doesn't matter. If you've got someone injured, you can just throw them on LTIR until the end of the year, and then and have them come back. So maybe we're having one of those situations emerging. I do think if they're going to be competitive and expect to take on Florida or any of the powerhouse teams in particularly the East that have really been chopping at the bit all year, because the playoffs has basically been set in this year for several months now. They're going to have to do some upgrading somewhere, but how and where? I mean, tomorrow will be very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see which teams stand pat, and if there's any last sort of fireworks that we see in the next little bit.
Yeah. And Jordan, just to answer kind of your question that I skipped over there, sorry, is that, I mean, in the East, the team I would be worried about is kind of the ones that might make a move, but stand pat, like the Tampa Bay Lightning. You have to think that they could just be in regular season mode, and then they'll turn it up when they get to back into the playoffs. And you got to think the Penguins probably might make a move, but they might stand pat. I don't know what they could be capable of doing, but they've got kind of on their last legs with this team. Like they're in like almost like a generational switch now, that Malkin and Crosby and all those guys are getting old, and they've been able to swap in goaltenders, which is tough to do. But you got to think the Penguins, that their experience, Lightning, and then obviously the Hurricanes are a good team. And it's interesting because everyone's kind of set there. Those top teams, Florida, I was surprised Florida's doing as much movement because they're in first place, like, and they're making big moves and they're getting rid of draft picks. But you kind of think of like what's happening in the NFL, and it's like, if you're built to win now, you go out and get that person. Who cares about picks? And it's kind of coming into every sport now, is where, hey, the whole world is shifting to this faster pace, and rebuilds are faster and everything's faster. So these picks will go, but the Hurricanes have been in there for a while. They'd be a tough team to watch. And I don't know. It will be interesting tomorrow. You tend to see the older guys get traded more than a guy in peak career.
Well, there's certainly the guys like Mark Giordano who are now in the point of their career where they're chasing a cup, right? And they're probably making it clear to the general managers, Seattle's going to be a lottery team. They're definitely, he wants an opportunity, and he thinks he can get that in Toronto, and certainly a huge upgrade, just even in terms of where they are in the table to see all of a sudden you're on a competing team. That's huge. And he can definitely be a piece for them. You're right. Zdeno Chara, I think, would be the same kind of thing if that is somebody the Oilers or anyone else is targeting. Although it's interesting because, the Islanders haven't been terrible, but they're definitely, he's a missing piece for somebody else, I guess. But it's interesting. just to close this out, you're right. Florida seems to be all in and a little bit more so. I think that this is a reaction to the result they found themselves in the first round last year in the Battle of Florida, where they went through a great season last year, thought they were really in a great position to compete for a Stanley Cup, and met the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round and felt like they just did not have enough to get through them. And I think they're looking at how the East is shaking out again and going, we do not want to find ourselves with one or two injuries that cripple our opportunity to get deep in the playoffs, and adding a depth guy, a veteran guy like Claude Giroux, who, on most teams is your first line, scorer on a team that already has the kind of scoring they have. And again, like you said, they're giving up pieces. It's not just picks. They gave up Owen Tippett, and Owen Tippett is going to be a very good player in this league if he plays like he has in Florida, for the Philadelphia Flyers, I guess, moving forward. But a big opportunity for Claude Giroux. Lots of big names still on the table. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Elliott looks like he's got one more point. I'll let him jump in, and then and we'll wrap up topic one. Elliott, what do you got?
Yes or no from both of you tomorrow? There's about 1 million teams looking for goalies, and there doesn't seem to be any available. Is there a substantive goalie move tomorrow? Yes or no? Jordan?
Yes. Yeah, I think Marc-Andre Fleury is not a Chicago Blackhawk by the end of the day. I don't know where he goes, though.
Tyler?
Yes, and someone's going to reach for someone who's not that good, thinking that they're an answer.
Yeah.
I
think that's true.
I
think that's true. Yeah, but fair enough. Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think that just, to play the homer for a second, I think that's what the Oilers are in the position of doing. I think they've accepted that they're going to go with the guys they've got. And look, I mean, Mikko Koskinen has been really good. They've won 5 games in a row, basically riding him. Mike Smith had a good outing in game 4 of that 5 in the homestand, but Mikko Koskinen is playing as good as an NHL goalie should be expected to be. None of these guys are going to be superstars for them, but it's very much like what Tyler was saying last year with Jack Campbell. It's like, sometimes if a goalie gets hot, you kind of got to go with it and hope that you have one of those Cinderella runs, like a Bennington, or
I was just going to say Bennington,
was it Leighton or Lawton or somebody who took Philadelphia to the finals a few years ago and then disappeared. But like, once in a while, a goalie that you don't expect will get hot near the end of the season and can do something special for you. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Edmonton, but I think what they're looking at in the goalie market is there's just not a better option. You know what I mean? And sometimes doing nothing and hoping what you have is enough is better than taking a gamble and failing, I would argue. Any last thoughts, boys?
I think picks do get a little crazy tomorrow, because you're not seeing these kids come in and dominate. Like Lafreniere in New York is only like 20 points or something around there this year. So it's easier to go out and get someone and just be like, whatever, we'll just deal with the draft when we deal with the draft. You can find guys in second and third rounds now.
Totally. Well, as I said at the top, all of everything we've just said probably is irrelevant by the time you're listening to this, unless you're one of the early morning listeners of Hat Trick. So, maybe you're able to see how smart we really are by the time you're listening to this, whether or not anything we said came true. That's it for topic one.
Do you like fast cars? Do you like when they race? Whether you're a seasoned Formula One fan or you've just discovered the rush of racing, check out the PitStop podcast presented by the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Join Jordan, Tyler, and Braden each week as they recap every race, as well as break down the biggest stories on and off the track, all before setting you up for the next race in the Formula One schedule. The PitStop podcast is available anywhere you get your podcast.
Okay, on to topic 2 here. Last week, Braden, Elliott, and I gave you our final 4 picks for the men's tournament in the NCAA. The NCAA tournament, March Madness. And we only did the final 4 because, we didn't, first off, have a 4-hour show like what you find on ESPN and everybody else leading up to the tournament. So we just went with the final 4. And I can tell you right now, mine's already busted. Most people's brackets, I think, are busted. That's how the game is played. I'm going to go to Tyler first, because you haven't had a chance to get in on this. When you look at your bracket and you look at how this tournament has unfolded so far, how's March Madness treating you?
My bracket was done after day 1. Very early as well. I believe I had Kentucky going to the Final Four, and they were a 2 seed, and they were at one point towards in February and end of January, they could have been a 1 seed, but St. Peter's took them out, and St. Peter's won again today. So number 15 seed is going to the Sweet 16, and there's been a ton of upsets this year. There's a ton of upsets every year, but on both this men's bracket and the women's bracket has seen 6 double-digit seeds win on the first weekend, and that's huge for the women's bracket, because usually it's just the top 10 teams that are just dominating everybody. So there's always been parity in the men's, and the women's is getting parity now, and it's exciting. It's the best betting weekend of the year if you're a sports bettor, and I am, and I'm not a good one.
Well, Elliott wouldn't be either if he'd put any money on his beloved Iowa, losing to 12 seeded Richmond in the first round. Elliott, how hard was that to suffer?
Man, not even did they. Yeah, it was brutal. When I saw that game, I was like, you know what? Like, that was a bad call. Hilariously, the rest of my bracket remains relatively intact, and I'm actually doing well, including leading the Hat Trick podcast.
Yeah, you are.
Bracket league right now, which is somewhat surprising to me. I mean, I think, just to double down on what Tyler said, there's been so many surprises and so many upsets, but I also don't have a lot of confidence this year in the rankings. I think coming out of COVID in the last 2 years of how much collegiate sports has been interrupted by COVID and shutdowns and I think it was really hard for the NCAA to get a really good sense, particularly like what's the difference between a 5 and a 6 or a 3 and a 15 and a 12, and I think you're really seeing that sort of come to fruition in this, which is great. I mean, it's awesome. The chaos of this is why we all love watching it. And games are so swingy and shorter and things happen fast. And it's just, it's what makes the tournament great. And so really enjoying it. And I think, having a bracket and following things along, and I wish I still had my beloved Iowa to be cheering for, but Iowa State was still around for a bit. So that's okay. As long as we got some representation from Iowa.
Why Iowa?
Absolutely. No, I've been there once.
Okay. To say the Big Ten in both basketball and football is kind of notorious for Jordan's going nuts. It's kind of notorious for being bad in playoffs. The Big Ten in football is always disappointing when they're in the top 4 and in the playoffs, and in basketball too. Like I'm wearing a Michigan hat right now, and I'm a Michigan fan, but they shouldn't have been in the tournament, and now they're kind of like the only Big Ten team that's doing anything in it, besides like Purdue.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Michigan because if I'm not mistaken, Elliott, it was Braden had Tennessee going deep. Braden had Tennessee in his Final Four. So Michigan, number 11 seed there, beating Colorado State, who was 6, then coming up against Tennessee, who's 3, beating them by almost 10 points. And now they'll face on Thursday, they'll face Villanova. I mean, you gotta be having a great time as a Wolverines fan right now.
Well, they're a very punchy bunch.
Yes.
For that.
No, that was good. That was very good. Obviously they're one of those teams that you've got St. Peter's, I guess, would be the only lower seed still in there above them. Iowa State obviously have 11 as well. But anyway, I'll just quickly acknowledge too, Elliott, you lost Iowa. My final 2 is already busted because I very boldly, for some reason, had Auburn, who was number 2, all the way in my final 4 and then into the finals against Gonzaga. So I'm not quite sure what I was thinking there, but maybe Miami beating Auburn. So lots of big storylines there. Let's jump really quickly over to the women's side because as Tyler said off the top, there's been some big games and some big upsets there too. And what's I think really cool, and we've talked a lot about on this show about like representation and sort of the balance of how, there has been a shift culturally, but moreover, even just in how the broadcasting of these events are held and the recognition that the women's game is getting. Basketball, I think, is probably the best sport when it comes to team sports right now, as far as promoting the women's game. Obviously, the WNBA is the most successful professional women's league in North America in any sport. They've got great funding. They've got a great partnership and relationship with the NBA, which is what's working for them. We've talked on this show about how the only way for a women's hockey league to work in North America is if the NHL puts some significant support behind it, because it's just not going to work without it. But what's really cool in Canada, at least, and I assume it's similar in the States right now, but it feels like the coverage has been pretty balanced. We've got a lot of, on like the 4 or 5 TSN channels, well, there's 3 men's games on, there's usually 2 women's games on the other 2 channels. Like I have found myself flipping through, checking scores and constantly bumping into these women's games and staying, watching a quarter, watching, the end of regulation. And it's fun. It's good basketball. It's different basketball. Obviously it's a different sport when it's being played by women, but it's a really exciting game. And we've got some big upsets. I wanted to highlight South Dakota and the Coyotes, who are a 10 seed beating number 2 Baylor. I mean, that's a big program in Baylor. Have you ever heard of South Dakota? Like what a big game that must've been for them. And obviously, exciting for them. Do you guys agree with me or feel like it's been a different kind of exposure for the women's side of this tournament this year?
Yeah, and it's also coming from the NBA players. Like LeBron was all over it on Thursday with talking about the players in the women's tournament, and there is players that are dominating games. Like Villanova has that Siegrist player that's just like phenomenal, like the second leading scorer in the league, and it's just dominating games for them. And it's, I don't know, it's just cool. It's a different game. It's a different game. It's actually, there's one team that Florida Gulf Coast that I was reading about. I haven't watched them play, but they took 64 shots on Friday, not one of them from mid-range, which if you watched like DeMar DeRozan play basketball, all he does is shoot mid-range jumpers. And it was super frustrating as a Raptors fan because the mid-range jumpers, like if a 42% accuracy is like probably an average shooter, a good shooter is probably around 42%. That's not a high number. Like you can be in the paint at 65 or at the 3 at 35. 42 for a 2 is not a great percentage. And so this team, Florida Gulf Coast for the women's, is 64 shots either in the paint or beyond the 3, nothing else, which is super cool to me that someone's actually figured it out.
That's awesome. That's Florida Gulf
Coast.
The Eagles. Yes. Yeah. They lost to the Maryland Terrapins, but yes, but they were a 12 seed. So
yeah, they were a 12 seed. They hung around.
They hung around. So Elliott, obviously licking your Iowa wounds, and Tyler laughed. And the reason I lost my mind when you said the only reason you cheer for Iowa is because you've been there once. Tyler's probably unaware that last week you also picked your second baseball team. Elliott decided he was going to follow baseball more closely this season. For those who didn't listen to last week's episode, obviously he's cheering for the Blue Jays in the American League, but he needed to pick a National League team. And so he picked the Padres. And the only reason he picked the Padres was because Braden and I basically dared him to do it. And he's now a devoted Padres fan. So Elliott is the kind of bandwagon jumper that literally the breeze can blow him.
Let me tell you, this is just a typical week being a Padres fan with Teets breaking his arm, totally devastating this season. I mean, we're going to be a pitch and catch team this year. And you know what? That's why I love this team. And I love to hate this team.
We're going to make this a thing. You're going to become like the official Canadian Padres fan. This is going to be a thing. Last thoughts, Tyler, on the NCAA tournament. Do you expect any more big upsets, or should we start to see some of the big teams just start to turn it on here as they get into the Sweet 16 and get prepared to try to make the 8 and the 4?
It'll be tough. Like the teams now, they have 6 days, five or 6 days to get it together. They don't play again until next Saturday. And like even right now, as we speak, TCU is about to beat Arizona, I believe, 72-70 as a huge one. So like these number 1 seeds and number 3 seeds, number 2 seeds, they got a week to figure it out and go over tape. But I mean, there's a lot of like Miami, Florida that just beat Auburn. That's a tough out. And I think Elliott might've been onto something there where the standings might not reflect where people actually should be because of the odd schedules from the last 2 years.
Yeah. Elliott, last thoughts?
Yeah, just circling back to the women's game. I mean, this is what happens when you put proper investment, resources, time, and energy into women's sports. It starts to filter down into the collegiate level. And ultimately, this is all we want. I wish the other big sports, and particularly with all the challenges going on in women's hockey right now, could see, what the 5-year, 10-year plan could look like. And if you need some advice as to what to do, I would just look at the WNBA and its impact on this tournament. And it's great. It is honestly great.
All right. That's topic 2. Hey, if you're a fan of Hat-Trick Sports, then I promise you're going to love the Backyard Basketball Podcast. Hat-Trick's very own Braden Dollar Coltman sits down every Wednesday with his best bud, Christian Steck. And together, they break down all the news, rumors, transactions from around the basketball world. Whether it's the NBA or college hoops, these two guys love talking basketball, and you are going to love listening every Wednesday on the Backyard Basketball Podcast. Let's round this great show out here with topic 3. As I mentioned off the top, Tyler, you're going to be hosting an NFL podcast. So, we are looking to you for some guidance as to what on earth this NFL offseason really means. There is a lot of big names going a lot of different places. Is it all just, smoke and mirrors, fog of war? Or are we really looking at a couple big shifts for some teams that have struggled in the past little while? I guess that's the big question. Let me throw some big names at you, and then I want you to tell me what your analysis of the offseason has been so far. Obviously, arguably, the biggest name, if you want to call it that, being traded so far would be Russell Wilson moving to the Broncos. That's a team that has, since Peyton Manning, not really had a genuine bona fide Super Bowl caliber starting quarterback. They get a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Russell Wilson. I don't know if he's still of that caliber or not. You can tell me that. We obviously have Davante Adams moving. That's a big, fancy, flashy name. Khalil Mack is moving to the Chargers. There's a lot of different names, and there's also a lot of names that are staying in the same places. Probably the biggest name of that being Tom Brady after his 2.5 week retirement, staying with the Buccaneers or coming back to the Buccaneers or whatever. Did Adam Schefter just prematurely retire Tom Brady, and then Tom Brady decided he didn't want to follow that and decided to stay? I don't know. Let's go to Tyler first. What do you have for us? What is your thoughts? Give me the big picture NFL offseason so far.
Wild. It's wild. It's exciting. Everyone, this is the thing about the NFL, it is a copycat league. So the minute that Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay, which had a team ready to compete in the playoffs, they went out and got Tom Brady. We need a quarterback. Then the Rams, we have a team that's ready to compete in the playoffs. Let's go get Matthew Stafford. Boom, Matthew Stafford. Now all of these teams that are built already for the playoffs are going out and making moves. It's Russell Wilson in Denver. That oh my goodness, that division is stacked. It is stacked. The NFC West last year and the last couple of years is now like the AFC. The AFC West is unreal. Every single game in between that division, like when they're playing themselves, they should be on Monday night television. It's just primetime television the entire time. But to me, like the weirdest thing is Aaron Rodgers came back and he's been villainized. He's been hated for his stances on COVID and all that and vaccines and the fact that, he just wants money. But he came back and he said, I want to win. And he did take a cap friendly deal to play, which what I thought was with Davante Adams, his buddy. But Davante Adams also needed to get paid. He's a free agent. He's the best wide receiver in the league by far. It's not close. And all of a sudden they trade him. And when I saw that, I was like, no, it doesn't make any sense. Like, is Aaron Rodgers then not going to come back? Has he changed his mind? What's happening? So it's been wild. He eventually came out that he did know about it and he understood the situation. And some of me thinks that he went to management and said, hey, we're not going to be able to sign Davante, so let's get him to a place where he wants to go. He wanted to go to Las Vegas. He's from the area. He's best friends with their quarterback, Derek Carr. So the two of them together is going to be unreal to watch. That whole division is going to be amazing. Deshaun Watson's in Cleveland now. So Baker Mayfield's up there. Jimmy G's out there. Indianapolis needs a quarterback. Carolina needs a quarterback. New Orleans needs a quarterback. Those teams can compete in the playoffs now. So whoever is going to go out and get, I think Jimmy G will be waited on. So the San Francisco's got no rush to trade him. So they'll wait, see where the market is and probably get something more out of it. And now Baker Mayfield's pissed. He wants out of Cleveland. Obviously they got a new quarterback, which that whole thing was handled crazily. But now where's he going to go? It feels like Indy would be a good spot. He's a young player. Baker Mayfield gets shit on all the time. He took the Cleveland Browns to 11-5 record, beat the Steelers in the playoffs. And then last year he was hurt the entire year, played through the injury, and he's just getting torn apart. He's a good player. Is still on his rookie contract. So he could go somewhere and he could win. And all you have to do in Indy is hand the ball to the running back. Jonathan Taylor will do the rest. So I could go on forever, but that's what's happened so far.
All right, that's topic 3. No, Elliott, you want to jump in? I know you're you're ready to go. Here we go.
Well, I think the crazy thing is, we've had Jordan's intro, Tyler's outstanding recap of everything that's going on, and we haven't even talked about Juju Smith-Schuster yet, and the Kansas City and what they're looking to do as a team as well too. I think that point you made off the start, Tyler, is exactly where I'm at with this team, or with this league right now, is that it's clear that the Rams had success loading up and going for a championship and ultimately won that championship. Everyone else is looking at that model and saying, yes, this works. I also think what's great is last year, the playoffs were so much fun because the level of parity in the league the parity is so high in this league right now that anyone can win on any given Sunday. And great movie, by the way, Any Given Sunday. And as such, the games are exciting and people are leading up and things are want to go. I'm really excited for NFL this year. I think that there's just the teams have gotten so much stronger. There's been tons of players, transactions, as we've articulated. But I think the parity is going to remain there. And it's going to be really interesting to see how, particularly some of these guys in the back half of their careers, these quarterbacks, I'm thinking Russell Wilson is probably like the best example of this. Like, how do they, this is his legacy moment here, right? Like, this is where he has his opportunity to come back and have his second act. Really interested to see how that goes. And I think there's a couple of guys going through that similar storyline as well.
Again, another name we didn't mention, and this is an interesting one too, is Von Miller going to Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo's got one of the most exciting quarterbacks, and they were so close, but failing for back-to-back crushing playoff losses to Kansas City. They're looking to figure out how they're going to get around that next piece of it. And even Tampa Bay, they get their quarterback and Tom Brady back, but then they add a guy like Russell Gage. They've added a guard. They're clearly is this the best possible sort of offseason the NFL could be hoping for in terms of continuing the momentum they have as the dominant sport in America, Tyler?
Well, the NFL kind of never stops, right? It's just always, always, always in the news. It is a 365 days a year headline front page news thing. And this was, dramatic. Like they dragged on the Aaron Rodgers thing for a month just to keep people talking. But now all this stuff is happening. People are talking about it. There's still huge names out there. Jameis Winston's still out there, who is a good quarterback that a team could use. Odell Beckham Jr., he's out there. Will Rob Gronkowski go back to Tampa Bay? So like these things that you can constantly talk about with the NFL, it's a league that is around in every conversation around sports every single day of the year.
But I think that there's something more to this, though. We've seen this sort of ramping up year over year with the NFL, and I got to feel like this is a product. This is a product of the NFL's decision to go offense first, to take with greater seriousness, protecting quarterbacks. Moving towards a pass first league. Part of the excitement around this and a lot of the excitement in this offseason is that these are like highly offensive people moving, not offensive as in insulting.
That's just Aaron Rodgers.
just Aaron Rodgers. But these,
Watson.
There's lots. We can get into that another time.
Let's not.
This is like this is what when you go offense first, and that is like the crux of your product now. When all these names are moving around, that's also generating excitement as well too. Fully appreciating that, yes, 100% 365, but this is, I think, ramping up, and we're going to see more and more of this as they continue to push offense first football.
Okay, so to play one of the most overused games in sports talk, winners and losers. Tyler, if you had to pick a winner so far this offseason and a loser so far this offseason from the team perspective, who would you go with first?
Denver Broncos winners. Once you get a quarterback, you're a winner. It's a quarterback league. Once you get a quarterback, you're a winner. So Denver Broncos probably the biggest winners. I wouldn't say the biggest loser is a team. I'd say Aaron Rodgers is the biggest loser. Got paid. I don't like Aaron Rodgers, but I respect him. I understand what he's doing and why he's doing it in terms of the football side of things. But losing Devontae Adams immediately takes them out of Super Bowl contention. I don't understand it. So I think that he specifically, so I guess Green Bay would be the biggest losers in this, and it's all because of cap space, but the cap is fake. The salary cap in every sport is fake. It's just everybody just kicks the can down the road. They spread money around. They switch it over to bonuses. It does, like, New Orleans was $80 million or something, $60 million over the cap, like, on Tuesday. And now they're like 20 million under it. It makes no sense at all. They didn't cut anybody. So I don't understand it. People that are much smarter than me will understand it, but Broncos winners, Packers losers. And I guess that's it for me.
All right. So before I go to Elliott really quickly, because this just made me think of this. Do you think that there is a possibility that the Broncos either offered or would have offered almost the exact same package to Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers in like a sign and trade? Do you think that there is a possibility that it was basically once they knew they weren't getting him, they just took the same offer and went to the next available suitor?
This was the talk. That was the talk with as soon as Aaron Rodgers signed. And then it was like an hour, 2 hours later that they went and got Russell Wilson. And people were saying, oh, they must have been waiting because the coach in Denver used to be the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. So they figured, Aaron Rodgers might go there. But apparently from insiders that I've been reading about on Twitter and the Google, it was always about Russell Wilson. They were just waiting to Denver and Seattle were kind of waiting to see what, if Rodgers was moved, what the package would have been so that Seattle could have matched it or Denver could have taken away from it, which makes a little bit of sense, but it's a pretty risky play.
And I'm just going to dig in one more time on this before I go to Elliott. Is Russell Wilson like still what Russell Wilson once was?
Very much.
He's
so.
not running the way he used to, though. Like he's become more of a pocket passer in the last 2 seasons than he was previously.
That's okay.
Still elite.
That's okay. He's still elite. He's still a top 8 quarterback. He will take the Denver Broncos to where they need to be. And it's just one of those things where in Seattle, it just got the toxic and it just got a little crazy. And Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson just weren't getting along. And it's just, it'll change in Denver. And you will see, he won a Super Bowl and he's one play away from winning his second.
I mean, well, that play, a lot of people would tell you is where the fractures began, because there's a lot of people wondering if the play call in the first place was to allow Russell Wilson to throw the game-winning touchdown as opposed to handing it off. And if there was already some ego at play in terms of the decisions that were being made. And it sounds very much like when the team took their Hawaii trip to sort of decompress after it, the team had already kind of decided that Russell Wilson wasn't their guy anymore, and then they just sort of dragged it out. I don't know if any of that's true, but that's certainly what I've been reading. Elliott, let's go to you right now. Winners, losers. You've had enough time to think about this. I'm really excited to see what you come up with.
So a couple of things. If you want to get a sense of how good of a player Russell Wilson is, just take a look at what a massive step back Seattle's going to take this year, and you'll see how much he carried that team and for how long they have. And for that, I would list them as a loser. I think I'll start with my winner, though, and I'll say Cleveland Browns. I think that team's only getting more and more exciting and interesting to watch.
So I have a question for you then. Do they, like, there's an argument to say keep Baker, even though he's angry, because yes, Deshaun Watson won't be tried criminally, but he probably will be suspended by the NFL. And however many games that is going to completely affect their season next year. So if he is suspended, is that a good move for Cleveland?
Yeah, I think so, because I think a little bit of competition in that space is good. I think Baker Mayfield being a little pissed off might be a good thing for the team as well, too. And to exactly your point, we'll see where we end up in terms of this whole Watson mess. But regardless, you've got assets there to move to make your team better. And I think there's a lot of good things, strong things around them in that space.
Well, I will say that Baker Mayfield will not be setting foot in the Cleveland Browns organization ever again, whether he's signed with the team or not. He will not show up. There's no way he will show up. Not a chance.
We'll see.
He has a better chance of coming to the BC Lions next year than he does ordering a soft drink with the Cleveland Browns.
Well, we'll look forward to that. And sorry, Elliott, did you just say Seattle was your loser then?
No, I'm going to go with my losers are both the Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers for the exact same reason. And that this was their opportunity to reset as organizations, but instead they have 2 old aging quarterbacks come back, which forces them to put some sort of product around them.
What the fuck are you talking about? Was that just one of those comments to set me off? You think Tom Brady isn't one of those? You just mentioned the MVP,
the 2 top
league,
guys,
and then the second.
No. Let me finish.
Most votes MVP. Those are the 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
If those guys walk away,
those teams are losers for that reason. No.
Yes, they're losers because it just sets back what both organizations need to do, which is engage in rebuilds. It forces them to build haphazard offenses to surround these great quarterbacks. And it's going to lead to middling playoff results like both teams saw last year, just only furthering.
What? No, Tampa Bay is a Super Bowl favorite. Would you rather set yourself up for success in 4 or 5 years or win a Super Bowl?
I don't think they're a Super Bowl favorite.
Well, Vegas does.
It's early.
Yeah. You're
All
right.
right. I'm just sitting back enjoying. I knew that I was going to get fireworks if I put these two guys together. This is awesome.
No, but honestly, like
the greatest athlete of all
I'm not
time.
saying, and this isn't an indictment on Tom Brady, but I just don't think for what they're going to have to pay and what they're going to have to do to surround him with workable pieces so that he can actually they can use him.
They have
Brady
Mike
makes it
Evans,
better.
Chris
Absolutely.
Godwin, Russell Gage. They have a defense. They've got an offensive line.
But look what happened. What did we see? What did we see happen to them last summer? They ran into better teams, and every other team around them has gotten that much better. That's what this entire segment has been about. And I don't think the Bucs are up into that space. And I'm just like I think that both teams and franchises. If I was a fan, I think you're better served if those guys don't just walk into the sunset like we all thought they were going to, and you have a breath of fresh new air in your lungs and a new lease on life.
That's a crazy opinion. I apologize to all the listeners out there that are listening to it.
Look, I want to break Elliott's in two pieces. I completely and utterly and like categorically and every other adjective you can come up with disagree with the Tampa Bay analysis. I'm just going to leave that there. We're talking about Tom Brady. End of conversation. Tom Brady has literally won Super Bowls with like water boys out there catching passes for him. It does not matter.
Fair.
But I will give you half points on the Green Bay thing only because they are missing the pieces necessary to ensure that their MVP caliber quarterback can make their team better. They need to figure out now. Again, it's early. We still have lots of off-season opportunities here. Maybe they go out and draft a wide receiver. I don't know what Green Bay's
a lot of wide receivers in this draft. There's a lot of good wide receivers in this.
So obviously, Aaron Rodgers needs someone to target. He loses his biggest target in Davante Adams. That's a big piece for Green Bay to fix. And we did see that even as good as Aaron Rodgers was this season, arguably the MVP, he won it, but I'm not sure he was the MVP. That's just
he was 1,000% the MVP. I hate his guts, but he was 1,000% the MVP.
All right. Regardless, he didn't have the team around him. You could in the NFL, even the best quarterback can't drag a team that's just not quite clicking there. There was some missing pieces and there's some problems in Green Bay. Can they fix that? I don't know. They are better for having him than whatever the alternative is right now. I would make that argument.
Yeah, and I think both those things are fair. Like both those teams are better with those guys in the lineup. Obviously, it's the best quarterback to ever play the game. And like you said, last year's MVP, and I totally support that. But I think long term for the future of those organizations, I think the dust had settled. I think a lot of people, including in those organizations, felt that those two gentlemen were done and it was time to move on. And there may have even been planning in place to take those steps. And now they've come back and thrown a wrench in it. And we'll see. But the rest of the league has gotten too much better that I just don't see it for the Bucs this year.
Okay, so we have Tyler here only for a few more minutes. So I have two things I need to address. Number one, you earlier in this segment claimed Davante Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL. I need you to defend that when I give you the name Cooper Kupp. Why is Davante Adams a better wide receiver right now than Cooper Kupp?
Cooper Kupp's done it for 1 year. Davante Adams has done it for 4 or 5 now. That's the difference. If Cooper Kupp comes out and does it again next year, then there's a conversation. But he's only done it one time. Davante Adams has done it consistently over the last 4 or 5 years.
And the Super Bowl ring on his hand doesn't change that for you.
No, just because you are on a good team doesn't make you a better player individually as someone on a different team.
Is there not an argument, though, that he was the best player for the LA Rams last year?
He was the best player for the LA Rams last year. But when he didn't, we'll see what happens with Davante, because when Cooper didn't have Matthew Stafford, there was no talk about him.
Right.
And now Davante doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Last question then for you, and we'll round it out here. There's one team we have not talked about. We kind of have to. What do the Detroit Lions need to do they've become like the new Browns. Like the Browns have figured it out. What like the Detroit Lions are one of those teams that it's really like, it's just sort of, it's hard, right? Like it's gotta be hard as a lifelong Lions fan to feel like, will they ever climb the hill?
It gets easier every year because you don't expect, there's no hope. There's no disappointment if there's no hope. And we don't have any hope. And next year is a write-off. We knew that when we traded Stafford and we got Goff. We can't trade Goff. Can't trade his contract. You have to pay him. You have to play him. He ended up being pretty good over the last 4 or 5 games last year. But this whole year is a write-off. And this, I don't know, the next decade could be a write-off. I don't know. I like Dan Campbell. I hated the signing. I love him now. I think that team played, the bunch of guys they have on the team that probably some of them shouldn't be in the NFL are playing hard for him. And that's all you can ask for as a fan of a team that has a new coach what is that coach getting out of these players? And he is getting more out of them than they probably have skill-wise.
If I set the line at 4.5 wins this year for the Detroit Lions, would you go over or under?
Oh boy. I'd have to look at the schedule. I bet that they win 5 games next year.
Is that too many to be a top draft pick?
Yeah, we got it. Yeah.
Probably.
Right? It's kind of what they can win and what you want them to win, I think, are probably very different if they're in the rebuild. It is the hope that kills you. And I guess, as you've said, if there's no hope, it can't kill you. I'm going to let you both have one more shot at this. Any last thoughts? Elliott, have we beat down your picks here for losers enough? You want to change your pick? You got one last chance.
No, I'm sticking with it. I'm good
Nice.
to go. Looking forward to that first round exit for the Bucs this year.
Tyler, we have a new podcast with you hosting coming up this offseason, throughout the offseason. It'll be here probably into the summer, right before the season. We'll really get it going. What can we expect? What can you give us as just like a tease as to what your ambitions are for the podcast? It's called the Running the Clock Down. What's the goal?
The goal is to just have fans of the sport talking about that week's biggest news, biggest plays, biggest the biggest games that have happened that week before and the ones that are coming up, not from an analyst standpoint or not from a professional, just because a lot of times now you just find people are saying things just to get clicks. And the crazier thing they say, if they're right 1 out of every 50 times, then it's just like, oh, this person's going to get money. This person's going to
That's my entire business model.
Yeah. So I don't want this show to be that. I just want it to be a couple of people who love football talking about what happened that week.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to that. That'll be coming up, as I said, into the summer here, running down the clock. Tyler, you are also going to be on PitStop on Tuesday. I know you got lots to talk about there. Awesome race in Bahrain. We'll save it for that.
Yeah, really looking forward to how Mercedes justifies this loss or blames it on someone else this time too.
What loss? Mercedes won today. That was a win for Mercedes today.
As far as they're concerned, that's a win. Thank you both for joining me. It's another edition of Hat-Trick. Awesome to have both of you here. Tyler, we really appreciate it. As I say, people can find you on the PitStop podcasts on Tuesdays following Formula One races. And then into the summer, we will have Running Down the Clock on the network. We're very excited about it. Thank you, Elliott. Thank you, Tyler. That's Hat-Trick. Hat-Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I knew he'd pick a fight. I knew he would pick a fight.
Oh, come on. It's like Michael Jordan. You don't bet against Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.